Hello and welcome to my first beat making video. A lot of people have been asking me how I make my beats, or more or less they want to see the process of it, and I'm not the one showing exactly what I do when I make beats, but I won't show you every step. I'll show you little by little my process of working, and maybe upload that once or one, two, three times a month tops, or maybe four. We'll see. But we start off here. So let's get into it. And the first thing I like to do is browse through Splice. And it usually looks like this on my first page when I open up Splice. And I usually find samples on the website. I think it's easier to manage different tabs of this program on the website. But then I just sit and go through the list till I find a sample that I like. I will do this for hours, and I will actually cut here. So, to start off in the program, you can see my 16 pads right here equals also the 16 pads onto the screen that you can see. And when I find a sample that I like, I just drag the sample in onto one of the pads. And I use both the software and the hardware called MPC. The hardware is called MPC1. So right now I have my first sample. And I'm not gonna go very long with that loop or whatever. I mean, you could loop it. So that it plays over and over, but I actually like to chop my samples. Chopping means that you cut it up, different pieces, and use different pieces of the sample. Right now you can see me using the hardware, controlling everything. I'm controlling everything through the hardware, but sometimes I look at the software. I actually have my software right behind you guys, that camera. But I like working here in the hardware. Now I'm just making some fine tuning to the chops, both my start point and end point. So start point is right up in the left corner. My end point is the one on the right. Once I have my chops, I will fine tune this a little. Once I have my chops, I go ahead and click convert. After I chop the sample up, then I convert it to a program. And in this case it is a so-called drum program, which put the chops on the 4 different pads, as in this case I made 4 chops. Then I have my 4 chops. I will actually add some more samples from Splice. So here I have some extra. This is a little extra, or what I call a little extra. This is just some horn stabs. And those I would like to cut up just piece by piece. And I like to play around with my samples. Samples is basically the sounds we are using, and doesn't matter what sound you use. It could be stock plugins, which I don't play around with really much. I usually use real songs or Splice. Splice have been my main source these last months or since 6 months back. I like it really much, and you can do very much with it. And no, I'm not sponsored by Splice or anything. And this is a hella good of a sample as well. Yeah, it's really dope. I have worked with this sample before, but just because just because of this video I'm gonna use it again, I think. Yeah, I'm gonna use this one. I like the feeling of it, and I think I can manage to attach it to the samples that I already have really well, which I didn't do the last time. So let's give me some time, chop it up, and then I'll get back to you. Yes. Alright, there I have my chops, and I'm actually kind of picky where I chop my samples. I mean, some would just cut the sample on the hits, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's where you cut it, and then put it to the beat, we'll say the drums. And I'm not like that. Well, sometimes I do that, but for most part, I like to cut it in very weird, in a weird way. I just cut it where I heard the sound fit best, because I like to change the melody to my own. So you just heard me tune the sample a little bit from to this. And I like to change the tune of the sample, making it my own. And usually I make beats fit very well with my own voice, as I'm rapping and I'm singing as well. But as I don't have another artist to work with and to make the beat fit their voice, I'm just gonna do it as if it was me that was gonna rap on it or sing anything. So now I found the chops that I like, and I've come to the conclusion of that the main loop is gonna be contained with these 5 chops. And I think it would be around like 91, maybe between 88 and 91 BPM, but I will start off at 91 BPM. So what I like to do first of all, though, before I start recording my sequences, is to create a drum program. I like to start with the hi-hats. It's gonna be the main part of the drum kit that's gonna be playing almost through the whole beat. And I like right away what I hear, so I just drag that in to my pad number 3, and you'll see how I build my drum kits. So I just drag those 4 in, and as you can see in the program, I've put them like on a row from bottom to top, or from top to bottom. And that's because there I will have all my hi-hats. Yeah, either way I can play the drums. I usually lay my kicks off to the left, my snares in the middle, and then I can just go between different if I like to do a live performance on them. This is for producing only, but I go with the same structure. So now I'll choose my snare. That's the second instrument of the drum kit, because the snare, it has to sit right on the hi-hat, but as well the kick is gonna fit in very well to the snare later. But the snare, it has to ride on to the hi-hat and almost choke the hi-hat when the sample hits, the snare sample. So this is actually my favorite type of snare. Really short release, it's just in your face all the time, but the mixing is concluding for that. As I'm producing, I'm trying to catch feeling of in your face, especially for what I'm gonna do. It's more like a DJ Premier type of boom bap beat, and DJ Premier, he's actually my favorite producer. He's produced so many rappers that are dope, but also made the rappers sound dope, from my understanding of how he works with the artists, how he works with the beats. Well, that I don't know very much about, but he always tried to make the artist shine. Make the artist shine, and don't be afraid to try new shit or new stuff. I started working very, very minimalistic, and then I build throughout the process if I feel that anything's missing, and oh, what can I add here? But I feel that these samples that I got will do the job, and then just some drums, and then there will be a rapper on it that's dope, and then you can put in some effects. Right now I'm on track 1. So on the hardware, here is where you can see the track, and you can see right now up in the left corner of my MPC program, up in the right corner, left corner of the MPC program, you can see when I switch between tracks, it will say 1, track 1, and then track 2, unused, track 3, unused, and so on. And on track 1, I like my hi-hats, and for this sample, I think this hi-hat will feel the best. I know that it will feel better if I bring down the tune of it. So I will go from, let's say, 0 in tune to minus 1.22. So it will actually be a 4-bar loop, not a 2-bar loop. That's also how I mostly create my beats, 4-bar loops, and then work around that. So on track 1 I have my hi-hats. Now I'll go to track 2 and I will record my my snare drum. And you can hear that I record these on every second and every 4th hit in every bar, like 1, 2, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that's the groove. Now I open up my track 4. I just skipped to track 4 from track 2, just because now it's time for some samples. And you can hear right now that the sample chops off. There, it's completely ending right before the next one, which I will try to fill that in if I don't feel like. Alright, I can put the kick right here. Let me show you. I like these two together, but I have taken off some of the release or the end so that doesn't it's not that long in the end, because I want the kick to also be right in your face. So for this one I'm actually gonna tune it a bit down again. One thing I actually notice now is that I have something on the MPC that puts all my hits onto the grid, which is these lines you can see on the screen. I don't usually use that, so that's funny. But what I do when apparently I didn't turn it off, I go in and change this, so I would just do it so that the beat feels more human. So now I've been rearranging the drums, and this is what we got. I like that. Alright, so I like that loop a lot. Up in the left corner, right here on the hardware, I'm actually gonna change the track names. So track 1, that's hi-hat. So I put a double H on that because I know that's hi-hat. And on track 2 is my snare. So I name that snare. And on track 3 is my kick drum. And track 4 is the sample. And right now it says simple, but I will go with that. Track 5 then. I should be able to use this as fills in some of the sections, where I also can mute the main sample, the main loop. And as you can see on the grid right here, it doesn't sit perfect, it doesn't need to either, because I think that the feeling is actually caught right towards the drum samples and also the main sample, and I could cut the main sample totally and this would sound great. Listen to this. I think that at this part, the last part of the 4-bar loop, that it's a little too close or overlapping the grid, so I put it slightly behind just to make it last a little longer. I don't know how to explain that, but that's the feeling it makes when you do that. So if I actually cut the sample right now on the last 4-bar, listen. It actually makes the head bop a lot more. Yeah, I think it's time for those horn stabs. It will fit right perfect in a chorus, I feel like that, or in a bridge, from the chorus to the next verse after the first chorus, or from the intro to the first verse. Yeah, this turned out way better than my first beat did with this main sample. And I just need to rename these. So these are the horn stabs, and I named them horn stabs, or the track horn stabs, so that I know exactly what it is when I like to revisit the project. And here I have string, I don't know if it's called staccato or whatever, but I'll just name it strings for this project. Here is Logic Pro, and Logic Pro is my DAW, my digital audio workstation. And here you can see a little bit of MPC software as well. And I try to make it smaller because right now I don't need a big picture. And I'll go back to track 1. That's my hi-hats. But track 3, that's my kick. And right here is an icon which you click on it, you can export the audio, which will be this 4-bar loop. And as you can see here, it's at 91 BPMs, beats per minute. So in Logic Pro, I have to change that to 91. Sometimes I actually go with the decimals as well, but as I haven't in this beat, I will just put it at that. And now I just do this for my kick and then my snare. And after I've done the snare, I take my hi-hat. In here, I can open up a mixer. So right now it should sound bad or unmixed, unbalanced in the mix, but it will change as soon as I turn on these faders. It actually sounds pretty good. So what I do is that I take all the faders, bring them down a bit. And when the volume is lower, I can actually hear all the instruments much clearer. Like the kick. I could bring it down a bit, but I want some more bass in it as well. Take out some of the low end and increase some of the low end, which is the bass frequencies of an instrument or any sound. And then I will increase around 5 kilohertz. And I decrease some of this because it's mostly blurring the voice of a rapper, and you can make the kick really bounce through the mix. As you hear, the kick drum is not very high up in volume, but it's there. It's in your face. And here's the snare. And around 400 Hz, you get the pop. So listen. That's the pop of the snare drumming in frequencies. And I don't need to decrease much of the lower frequencies. I like that. And bring up high frequencies around 7 kilohertz or 7,000, around 7,000 hertz. And then find the muddiness of the snare. And when I find muddiness, just decrease that. And maybe not so much, because you can hear that this snare is also right in your face. I like that. I want that in mono. So what I do is I put the channel to mono, so that it is mono, but then I rewrote it to a bus channel, which I'll actually do with all my instruments. So I start with a kick, go to bus 1, go to my snare, take bus 2, my hi-hat, bus 3, then comes to the sample, bus 4, strings, I go with bus 5, horns, I go with bus 7, bus 6 I mean. So now they're routed to all of these different bus channels, and I start naming them. I name them kick, I name them snare, hi-hat, sample, strings, horn, stabs. And what I do is I put all these 3 onto another, which will be drum plus, because it's a plus. It's just an additional channel which I group all of them on. And I do these for the instruments on bus 8, so I name that instruments. But right now I just turn down the strings, but also the horn sample. So now when the strings are in mono, putting on some effects, and I use a plugin from Waves, which is called Apex Vintage Exciter. That plugin increasing like the warmth, but also the coldness of the sample. This is cold, this is really warm, and I like something in between. I like it to sound clear but not too modern. And then I also use a Waves plugin called the Kramer tape. So in here I like to make it sound a little more old school with some wobbliness, but not too much, and I like that. That's really good. And now on the sample bus channel, which the sample is connected to, I have a stereo imager which I control the stereo image of the sample. And just let me find it. It's Isotope's Ozone Imager. And right now you see it's in mono. It's going out very straight into the speakers, which is nice for the most part. But I need a little more room to play with the other sounds. So I like it to be in the center, the main sample, but just a little more headroom for it. And this hits really hard. I like it really much. And we can actually just drag out an 8-bar loop and see what we want to do with this last. I think cutting on the snare will sound good, sound great. I love that. So now when I have my 8-bar loop, I just copy that right here. This is where the 8-bar loop will start. So I also bring up some colors to my project. I keep all the tracks in different colors just to keep an eye on them, which is which, but I also read on the left side. But the intro, I usually go for a really ugly color. Nobody likes the intro anyway, but it should catch an attention, like, alright, I want to keep listening. And what I usually do in the intro is that I just delete the drums, maybe till here, keep the last hit of the snare, and this is what I start off with, and depends on what I come up with on the go. And as in right now, it's really boring. I mean, I wouldn't want to rap on this because something is missing, and that is the bass line. So now you can see the unit, and the unit is called Machine Mark II. I like acoustic basses. Sometimes I go with synth, I go with sub basses, but for this one I want a bass guitar. I think that this sound will do the best. Yeah, so now I'll just play around figuring out which bass line will sound the best. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and... This one is a little too weak right now, so I just increase the velocity, which is the hardness. You will hear that it increases the volume as well, but the impact, and the impact when the sound hits, that's the most important thing. Could be really weak, could be strong, and I want the bass line to be pretty much in the presence. The bass line I always put a little behind the grid line because you want that drum to shine through. Sometimes that doesn't work, but for this beat it will be perfect. And you hear that I cut a lot on my bass notes right before it ends, or the bar ends. And that's because it sounds like the ending and it's a new beginning when the loop comes around. But that might be a little too long of a cut, so I will increase the duration of the sound. Yeah, much better. Maybe a little more. Yeah. There we have it. That's perfect. That's lovely. And just a little switch up in the duration of a sound can make a huge difference. A lot of difference to the bounce. And you want a bounce that always feels new, even if you loop it, even if it comes again. And that's a mindset of beat making that I think that DJ Premier's done just right. Even big producers like Pete Rock, Marco Polo, they make a loop doesn't sound like a loop. Sorry, they make it sound fresh and new every time it comes around. And now I'm just renaming my bass. So this is bass name or bass 01, doesn't really matter. Bass 01, bass 02, bass 03, just so that I can have some control of over what I'm doing. And these three as my bass tracks. I like to have this one and this one a little higher just because it's in the end of every 4-bar loop. And it's gonna be a little higher because now you know that's where the rapper should be putting their punchline at, or the most reasonable bar at. The second and the fourth one, always. And remember that if you are a rapper. I put these three on a new bus track and rename that bass. And now these three, I can connect them to the last bus channel called, let's call it the beat. And that's just the beat. So everything that's we have connected so forth here from here is just put onto this channel. And I like to recolor this one, maybe light purple. Usually I color these tracks too, and I will maybe put on a little effects on the drums, like this exciter again. maybe a little more presence. Yeah. And I will actually put on some EQ, equalizing, on the bass line as well. So I increase around here, so it got a little more stomach to it. And around 1000 hertz, 1 kilohertz, and around 3000. And as I don't have any frequencies visually here, I can increase them just so that I see them, but then decrease them a little bit again. I can even decrease a little bit on these two, because it's a really good bass sound already. And then I cut off maybe between 25 and 40 to make it more in your face. I could even decrease around here, usually a lot of muddiness around here, but I don't know, sometimes I don't. After the equalization, I go with a little distortion on the bass line, and what the tone does is basically which frequency you want to distort. But around here, sounds good. Maybe a little lower. Yeah, here. Now it's a really fat bass, and that goes really good with this type of beat. And now I put on a so-called compressor. And this is a stock plugin in Logic. I really love using it for side chaining, which I will do now, which means whenever the kick hits, the bass lowers down a bit. But I put on a soft distortion just because we have it here, makes it a little more present as well. And that differs. Sometimes you want to put it on hard, sometimes you want to keep it off. Actually, for this sound I want to keep it off. But here you can see it in a graph, and basically the box on the left here is how the curve is looking, and the curve is how the sound cuts in and goes back out again, or comes back in, goes back out, comes back in. And a lot more that you work with this, the more you'll understand it. This is for my strings, yeah. I even increase a little more, around 5 kilohertz. I want them to be more present than they are, so. But the most important is stereo imaging, and this one I just use right now to look where they are, the strings. They're all over the place actually, so I like to decrease this to make it more present in the middle. Maybe a little more amount to center them a bit, but not too much. They're peeking out to the left, and they should in this case, because that's the root of the producer that made the sound. The root sound is peeking to the left. Horn stabs. Here's the interesting part of horn stabs. To make it more present, you can increase around 3 kilohertz. I think that the horn sample sounds great when it comes to presence, as in right now, so I won't touch that. I just decreased on the lower frequencies. But here, if I exclude just the chorus part and also use Ozone Imager, I can check where the sample peaks. It's out a little more to the right, but also in the center. So what I do is, if you can see here when where I keep the mouse, that's the stereo imaging if you want the sound to go to the left or to the right. And I want it a little more to the right, just because the strings are a little to the left, and that's to keep the mix balanced. So when you put an artist on it, still a great beat, doesn't sound all over the place, it sounds very balanced, but the artist shines through in the middle. And if you want to make it appear that the artist's voice also is in the background, if you listen to a stereo image in both headphones and speakers, you have the opportunity to do that by locking the whole beat in the center of this graph. I'm gonna show you. Ozone Imager, and then we go to this. Now it's mostly in the center. If you just increase on the stereo image, maybe a little less amount, increase. You see that it becomes more around, and that's what you want in the master. Right now it's not important, but in the master mix, this is what you want, almost, if you go for this type of sound that I do. And now I usually decrease the beat, that's to give it headroom in the mix, but you don't want to put out that to a rapper, because they will be like, I can't feel the beat, it's too low or whatever. And then I use Ozone 9 elements. And right now I don't mess with the equalization. Here you have a imager as well, a much better graph as also. Then I decrease it a little bit so that I center it a lot more. Yeah, looks great, sounds great. And now I increase some volume. And don't be afraid to show red on the stereo mix. That's a myth, you don't have to be afraid of that. As long as the sound is not distorting. And if the sound is distorting, if that's the sound you go for, then it's good. It's a lot of different sounds. People like different sounds, different things. That's the beauty of art. So, here's the beat. Here's what I've done. And what I usually do next is that I copy this section. I cut out some of the sections as well, like this maybe. And also here. Because it will sound like, oh, something new is happening. That's cool. Even if it's the same thing all over and over again. And as Pete Rock does, he puts a lot of snare hits on his second and fourth bars. A lot of times. I'm not working like that. I like to keep it more simple. Or it is pretty simple, but I like to keep it like this. For this video and this beat at least. So here is what we've done.